All right, so I've been holding off doing this review for a while, mainly because I didn't want to stop listening to this album, and I do feel like when I put a review out for an album, it does take a back seat so I can listen to other music so I can start reviewing those. And I just didn't want to stop listening to this album, so let's dive in. Oh boy, okay, you're not making it any easy for me about this one. Ænka, I believe is how you pronounce this album, from DVNE, and I'm pretty sure that's it because there's very little vowels on this, and I'm pretty sure it's not div, because that's kind of what it is. Div. Div. So stupid. They're a progressive metal band from Scotland. Oh boy, these guys came out of nowhere for me and just knocked my socks off. Four-piece band. These guys really blend a lot of melodic styles with hardcore accents to them. The best bands to kind of compare these guys to that I can think of is like the Ocean, in being this grand, massive sounds with snarls and screams and yells, while still blending a plethora of great talent in terms of musicianship, in terms of melodic constructions of sounds, as well as like journeys through their tracks and having longer pieces of music that tell this grand story. So this is actually their second album, their first one being Ashran. And I've listened to it a couple of times just to kind of get a good foundation for this album. But oh boy, as I mentioned, this one really knocked me out. Honestly, each of these tracks really make me excited about something that's coming up. Like, all these tracks have a moment of brilliance, whether it be that first track of Enuma Ellis, and geez, again, you're not making it easy for me, with this soaring guitar works of like rapid fire descending drum works and bass, with this really harmonizing vocal works and harmonizations within that. The blending of these two really do create something extremely special, and it's hard hitting, it's relentless, it's like bashing you over the head with these really good blast beats without having to default to the double kick drum where it's just the whole time. Like, it has this myriad of colors coming through within such a very small chunk, and it's only about 4.5 minutes. We come to the next track of Towers. Because it's a longer stretch of music, in around like 9 minutes long, you really do allow the track to open up, and it starts off with the continuation of that first track that just really drives it home with this dun 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 dun. So even though it has this very punchy heartbeat of drum work and rhythm style, it's not like incomprehensibly fast. It's very grounded and very rooted in this tangibility, while still maintaining such crazy sounds. And what I also love about this is the use of the synthesizer to really help punctuate and bleed certain sounds, and that's where all the different colors come from. It's reminding me of some of the later albums from Between the Buried and Me, where they're starting to experiment with different soundscapes that they can add to this very brutal approach to music. And that's what I love about Towers. It has this really heartbeat of a chugging guitar that just has this that helps ground that rhythm section, and upon which we have this very ethereal sounding synthesizer that's just punctuating the notes about it, that creates this maelstrom of this almost hypnotic soundscape that we have, that they are then able to kind of bring down, root back into the song proper, that then explodes into the big reprisal of the main theme that we had from the beginning. So then we come into the third track of Court of the Matriarch, and one of the things that I love about this that is present in Towers, but I feel is much more the start in this one, is the ebb and flow of this track. It's not at 11 the entire time, even though it does start off with a very punchy guitar licks with a very permeating drum track. What I love is that they're able to bring things back down, and we have this acoustical section that allows us to kind of take stock, take a deep breath before we lurch right into the better, like not the better, but like the meat and potatoes of this track. That's what I particularly love. Like it skyrockets you into this really lovely guitar sounds. They're distorted, but they're harmonizing within their distortion. And I love that, again, it's very rhythmic. This and it just, I can't help but like headbang away with this. And instead of just like letting the song taper out at about the 5-minute mark, they push it right into the 7-minute mark by allowing that area to really stretch its legs, to try different things, to see what else we can bring within this atmosphere of sound. And for most bands, they would usually just play that out and not do anything with it. But what these guys do is they use that as a springboard, again, much like Towers, to bring us back into the song proper. And it elevates the rest of the sounds that come after it to this whole new level of like, oomph. I don't know. I love that track. Now, I will say, if I had to really nitpick and like find areas that I wasn't too excited about, I would say that this album, it has moments where there's a lengthy period of silence between tracks. And in some ways it allows me to take stock, take a deep breath, and really, especially when all I'm doing is listening to the music. But on the other hand, there's a moment or two, specifically the beginning of Weighing of the Heart, as well as near the end of the album, where I think, is the album over? Like, is that it? Like, we've had about 20 minutes worth of really good music, but is that it? Are we done here? And Weighing of the Heart, the first like 30 seconds really is just the silence with only small sounds coming through. But once we get into the song proper, I love that this is much more of an interlude track. It's reminding me of a lot of the cases and incidences that we heard from Baroness's album of Golden Grey, where they had quite a number of these like interlude tracks where I felt like that was filler on there. This feels much more of a transition from the first part to the second part, where we go into Omega Server, one of the longer tracks at almost 10 minutes. Now, what I love is the dichotomy of this track of Omega Server. It starts off much where Weighing of the Heart ended, where it was very ethereal, very soundscapey. It didn't have a whole lot going on, but it did feel like a very big bottom. Omega Server kind of starts off that same way until you get essentially punched in the face with this metal track. And oh boy, once it starts, it's like trying to hold on to a cheetah at times. Now, not necessarily in terms of the playing style or the rhythm section, but in terms of that like beast, because this is probably one of the darker tracks off of here. And again, it still has that dichotomy. Like even in the mid section, the song takes its time and has that breath. It allows you to just listen to the guitar works with a little bit of synth overlay before, again, you get punched in the face. So I love the fact that there's this dichotomy that allows you to really appreciate both sides without really having to lean to one particular area or the other. Now, unfortunately, it is followed up with Ardean, which again is another track where I felt like, are we done? Because again, the first couple of seconds is just nothing, and it isn't until maybe 20 or 30 seconds in where you're starting to hear again a little bit of that interlude track. It provides a little bit of an island to Omega Server, being sandwiched between Weighing of the Heart and this track, but it does kind of pass the baton over to SI. I want to say that's probably 14, so C14. It might be. I hope so. And this one opens up very much like Dream Theater's Home track, where it almost feels like Eastern guitars, but like this really punchy rhythm section. It's like so like it has a really fun rhythm section and very bouncy guitar works within it, kind of framing the overall track. And what I love is the little jam session in the middle point, where there's this really fast-paced note within the guitars that provides the framework and the foundation for the rest of the boys to come in and play around. Such a really interesting structure of music in that sense. But what I particularly love is that they use this as a springboard into this massive jam session. And honestly, if I heard this live, I would be very tempted to jump into the pit at this point, because it's just this explosion of energy that they've really been building up towards. And it's just this maelstrom of this, like, I don't know, all this tension that I feel like this band has been holding on to, especially within this track, is finally released in this beast of a sound. And then we come into the 8th track of Maleka. I think that's it, Maleka. This track is really fun. I love how gritty it is. I love how bombastic it can be at times. I also love how fast-paced and harsh it is. And it really does bring that energy that we heard from SI-14 into this next wave. And then we come into the final kind of interlude track of Asphodel, I think it is, Asphodel. This is probably the longest stretch of a interlude, and unlike Wayne of the Heart and Adrion, I feel like this one lasts for a little too long, because once we get out of Maleka, I feel like the album has ended, especially when we come into this long stretch, and we do have this beautiful woman singing on this track over top of these keyboard sounds that I really do enjoy, but I do feel as though the silence is a little bit long on this one, and it's a little bit of a shame. Because we then come into the longest track of Setuya, and this track, it does everything that all the previous tracks do outside of the long interlude of silence. Like it carries the baton almost that Asphodel should have really been kind of folded into this track to create about like a 15-16 minute long track, but I still love where we go with Setuya. It's just a treat. It really does summarize the album overall. It's punchy, it's ethereal, it takes its time on it, it has this beautiful play out at the end. I don't want to say it fizzles out, but it just kind of, much like putting you on a raft and just kind of pushing you out into the sea and letting the waves crash over, it does a very gentle play out, which is an odd for such a harsh album at times. So yeah, if you haven't already figured out, I've been loving this album. I really have. The more I listen to it, the more I get out of it. I love the smaller points on this album, and I love all the different soundscapes and expressions that are found on here. There's so many different little nooks and crannies that I never really heard the first couple of times, and it's only upon maybe the 5th or even sometimes 10th listen that I'm getting a lot of those different flavors off of this. It should come as no surprise at this point that I love this with my whole heart, and it's very quickly approaching a full-on masterpiece. I need to put it on the shelf a little bit. I need to let that initial sparkle and shine fade a little bit so that I can approach this maybe in about a year after I've listened to it for another, dozen or so times, but just to see if that shine is still there, to see if it's really as wonderful and as gracious as like the new sound makes it out to be. But this one definitely gets his note seal of approval. This is a run, don't walk to go and listen to it, and it is at this point my album of the year. Like it's set a pretty high bar, and with so much great music that has already come out this year, that should tell you something. So yeah, that's what I've got for Etemen Ænka from DVNE. What did you guys think of this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting down below. Please give this one a listen if you're into this type of metal music. Even if you're not, there's really something on here to be loved by anybody. So yeah, that's what I've got. And if you like what you see and you want to help support me, consider donating to my Patreon. I've left the link down below. You get your name at the end of the credits, so that's pretty fun. And also check out my podcast, Quid Prog Quo. It's now on YouTube and also wherever you listen to your podcasts. And finally, check out my role-playing game channel. I'll be talking about Paranoia in a couple of days, so pretty excited about that. And that's all I got. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.